my assessment on the Penn State Ohio State football game coming in T minus 2 days, less than 2 days. And yes, I need a haircut, so don't even bother saying anything because I know somebody's going to say something. I apologize deep down to people that I've offended with this. So, anyway, if you know me, you know I know football, okay? I think everybody knows I know football. I've just obtained the knowledge. The nickname that I've been given is called the eye test. Everybody calls me the eye test because I can tell if a player knows how to play the game of football. And at my young age of 4, I know exactly how well guys can play the game of football just by watching them. So here's what the eye test shows. It shows guys like Lamar Jackson, and yes, this game's about Penn State, but let's get this out of the way. Guys like Lamar Jackson, guys like J.J. McCarthy, and I don't know, I'm just trying to think of a third person to talk about. Maybe, I don't know, I'm drawing a blank. You get the point. Guys that seem like they're pretty good, but then whenever the stakes get higher, we'll just say Penn State's coach, we'll go James Franklin. The stakes get high, that's where the expectation goes. Or that's where the performance goes when the expectations go up. Okay? So now we're stuck in a situation where, as a Penn State fan, I have to sit here and I have to watch my coach choke another game away. We have the advantage in terms of personnel. In terms of coaching, I actually don't think Ryan Day is that good of a coach. I know he's passionate or whatever, but he's not that good personally. He inherited a program from Urban Meyer, and I know everybody hates that narrative, but kind of true because he's done nothing with it. You could say he made a national championship or whatever, but Justin Fields, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jeremy Ruckert, Nicholas, I don't know how to say his last name. I'm not even going to try and say it. You get it. The offensive lineman, Chase Young, Wade, I can't remember his first name, Damon Arnett. Can you tell me who recruited all of those guys? Oh, Baron Browning, Jeff Okuda. Can you tell me who recruited all those guys? You can. Urban Meyer. So what does that mean? Look at the team that he put together last year to make the national championship. Didn't stock up on defense. And this year they might look a little bit better on defense. I know what the numbers say about them being third. Or look, anybody's going to look good playing against bad competition. And to be honest, Penn State hasn't played anybody either. Especially offensively, nobody. But Penn State has looked better, okay, against bad competition than Ohio State has. And I don't mean the 1 point per game. Penn State has actually dominated. They don't allow any long drives from any of their opponents at all. Versus Ohio State, who does pretty good, but they're a little bit more shaky when it comes to that area, when it comes to allowing longer drives. Because Penn State can force more 3-and-outs than Ohio State this year. They haven't even had teams cross midfield for most of their games. Ohio State can't say that. And Ohio State's plenty good. Their defense looks way better than last year. Well, let's not take that big step. Because actually, if you look at the statistics, when you want to talk about, people talk about explosive plays, how it's down. So, you know me, I took the liberty of doing some statistics. It's about 2.5 less explosive plays per game. But at this point in the season last year, they also hadn't played the bulk of their schedule. So, of course, they're going to look better defensively. So, when they actually play against the bulk of their schedule, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to allow more explosive plays. By the end of the year, we won't even be talking about a dominant Ohio State defense because that's not going to be a thing. Okay? They might look better than they did last year against Penn State, but Penn State will probably look better against Ohio State because last year was Manny Diaz's first year preparing for an All-American caliber receiver, and now that he has another year under his belt, hopefully Manny learns because he's probably, if not the best, he's one of the best defensive coordinators in the country, and to be one of the best, you have to adjust, you have to adapt because nothing comes easy at this level of football, especially against the top 10 opponent, top 5 opponent. Actually, in my rankings, I have Penn State in my top 5, but we don't need to talk about that. I think what decides this game, everybody says it's Ohio State's defense. is going to be that this game is in Ohio, okay? Not going to say that Penn State has the advantage when they're in Beaver Stadium, but if you look at teams, and this is a kind of dumb statistic, but if you look at teams' record versus the spread in the last 20 years, so this shows like I don't even know what the right word is, consistency or whatever, at the highest level. Penn State has beaten the spread more than any, best record against the spread of any team in the last 20 years at home, which means the home crowd contributes to more wins, or the home culture contributes to more wins. Maybe the players are just better at home under three different coaching staffs. See? It kind of just shows that it is the crowd more than the coaches. Not to knock on Paterno, who's arguably the greatest college football coach of all time. If not, he's probably top 5, top 3. So anyway, back to the matchup. We have Ohio State, who's, I wouldn't say offensively challenged, but I just want you to think about this for a second. This is 41 against Purdue, 37 against Maryland, 4 something like that against Indiana. What reason do you have to believe Penn State can't keep Ohio State under 30? Penn State is a great defense. They proved it last year, and now they have most of the same personnel, possibly an upgrade at some of the spots on the D-line linebacker. And now they're coming in against an Ohio State offense that's worse than last year, and they allowed, 40, I'm going to say 41, 42, something like that last year against Ohio State. So, 45, I don't know. You get the point, right? So, at the most, I think Ohio State might get a little above 30, but I'm shooting a little bit more around that 24 to 27 range for Ohio State. So then that comes to Penn State. You look at their offense, the last 11 games, and yes, only 2 of those games have been against ranked competition, so we can hold our horses a little bit when we talk about this. But they've scored, the longest streak in the country, have scored 30 points in 11 straight games, which means if Penn State keeps Ohio State below 30 points, that means they have a really good chance to win the game, because they're most likely going to get over. Because I don't think Ohio State's defense is at the level people think that it's at. So when you talk about Maryland getting 17, well, our offense can score more than 17. We've scored more than 17 every game this season. We've scored more than 30 every game. So why can't we get to mid-20s, high 20s, and threaten Ohio State? It's going to be a close game, obviously, because we're on the road and our head coach is known to choke games away. So I know I've seen people's takes saying Ohio State's going to look like they're controlling the game the whole time. I'm going to say no. Because whenever we talk about Penn State, Ohio State, we'll go to last year or 2018, 2017, right? So I'll use those 3 years as my example. 3 out of the last 7 seasons. Penn State has gotten off to an early lead. They're so energetic, so enthusiastic, and then they collapse because Franklin's poor game management, and not just him, it is poor play calling. You can look back at the 2016 Rose Bowl as you watch Moorhead call horrible plays to make our quarterback, who wasn't super accurate, make horrible shots down the field and give USC the ball back, and we ended up choking the game away and losing the Rose Bowl. And that was the first big knock on Franklin's career, was that choked away game, because he can still oversee and decide what we do, but I mean, it is the coordinator's call, but it's still his fault. Because he didn't have our team ready. They never seemed ready. He has his team mentally weak, and it's not like he's making them weak, he's just not making them tough, so they're automatically weak by those standards. So I wanted him fired a couple years ago, bring in somebody else maybe who knows how to use, because Franklin's useless. He doesn't call plays. He can recruit, I guess, but the thing is, good coaching comes with recruits. You don't have to be as good at recruiting if you're a good coach, but he can't coach. If we just had results, that would attract talent, because they want to come play for a successful school anyway. Coach Saban, I won't knock on him because I think that he is a decent recruiter. But would you rather play for a guy who's wants to be your buddy boy, or a guy who's going to promise you great development, you're going to win, and you're going to be successful. Your name's going to be more out there when you're going to go to Coach Saban. You're not going to go to James Franklin. I'm sorry. So, Penn State's offensive play calling, I think it's been pretty all right, but it's going to have to take a step up because, and I think Penn State's been hiding stuff, but I don't want to get my hopes up just in case. So many stupid play calls. I feel like every single game except for one game, we start off running. And I know you want to set the tone early, but they never, ever, ever, never start off with a play action or start off with a pass. I think they did one game, which was UMass. It's great, UMass. Every other game, we've ran the ball right up the middle, get 3 yards, run the ball, 3 yards, run the ball. We can't block. And when Franklin is pressed about these linemen, like J.B. Nelson, who came in here, and I get he kind of got shoved into a spot because Landon Tangwell had the unfortunate heart problem. But he shoved into this spot, but he still had plenty of time to prepare. And then when we asked Coach Franklin, he has the nerve to say that I think JB's played well. Or our center, Hunter Norzad, 2 guys in the middle of the line. How do you think they've played? I think they've done well. No, they haven't. I just thought I can think of a specific play from last week that Nick Singleton, I would have broken off a big carry last week. Hunter Norzad doubles a guy, which was you're supposed to double the defensive tackle, make sure he gets no momentum, and then you're supposed to move upfield. Norzad gets off the D tackle and then doesn't move towards the linebacker and seal it, so then Singleton has a free gap. He looks absolutely clueless, and the guy gets in the backfield and Singleton has no gain. That's just one instance of Norzad not knowing what he's doing in the run blocking game. And I don't need to explain pass blocking. That's Nelson's big problem. When you look at passing, the West Virginia game, they didn't even bring that much pressure, and Allen was still having to run and make plays. And he did a great job at that, which is why I think when Ohio State blitzes, they're going to be in for a tough night, because bringing blitz doesn't really work against Aller. He's poised enough at his age. It's actually kind of impressive. But I don't want to get too far off the rails because it'll sound like I'm housing his nuts in my mouth. So we'll not make too big of a stink about that. But yeah, he looks pretty good. I just don't like the play calling personally. Diaz has done a great job on defense though. He could definitely go to a bigger program if he wanted to, but I almost feel like he'll stay if he thinks we'll be successful. So if he doesn't stay, that'll tell you something about our program. That'll tell you what he really thinks, because he'd rather go somewhere else and coach. Even though he just coached 2 years ago, I don't think he's that good of a coach, to be honest, because he just coached a Miami school 2 years ago that didn't do well. Then the next year they were ranked, and now this year they're ranked. So he's more of a play caller anyway. And now on the Ohio State side of the ball, we talk about defense. It's new and improved. I guess you could talk about it. Me personally, whenever I look at the defense, everybody talks about the explosive plays and how they've allowed less. Well, why is that? Has Ohio State played any of the better teams on their schedule yet? No. Ohio State has not played. They played one team, I guess, with an explosive offense, if you want to call it that, and that's Maryland. And Maryland could have very easily turned that game on its head if they had a couple catches or just a couple of misfires ruin that game for them. That game was close down towards the end of the half, and if some of you guys will remember, Tua's little brother had a wide receiver open down the field, missed him. Big third down, throws the ball. I can't remember what the score was in the game, but I think maybe one score game Ohio State was up. Over the middle, receiver drop. Too many drops for Maryland to stay in that game, and they fall apart at the end, and Ohio State runs up the score at the end because they keep getting short field, and people act like it was a big blowout game, even though it was close until the early fourth quarter. So Ohio State really didn't look great in that game. Maryland could have easily put up 30 against Ohio State without a couple of those miscues. So anyway, explosive play battle. Ohio State hasn't played the bulk of their schedule yet, right? And last year at this time, everybody was saying the same thing that they're saying this year against the Ohio State defense. It's the same thing. The college football script, if you want to call it, repeats itself every year. Texas gets a big win, and everybody's like, oh, Texas is back. And then they lose to Oklahoma, and they choke the game away in the last minute 15, and everybody's like, oh, Texas isn't back anymore. Even though they said the same thing last year and said, no, they're back for real, but they're not. So, to reiterate, Ohio State, because I wanted to do the math, they're allowing 2.5, or I guess if you wanted to split it up, 2 and 3 per game. 2.5 less big, explosive plays a game. But when they play against a school like Penn State and Michigan, that number is eventually going to go up, and by the end of the year, it'll be a similar number. I think it'll be less, but it's going to be so similar, you won't even hear about this stat by the end of this year because of the explosive plays. I think they allowed, I want to say 70 or 80 some last year, and by this point this year, they're at 20 or 30 some. So they're on a trajectory that puts them slightly lower than where they were, okay? But they haven't played against the top 25 offense. That's not us, that's Michigan. But they haven't played against a formidable offense yet, so their defense is obviously going to look better. And I know Penn State hasn't either. But Penn State has just been more dominant. They literally, in 2 of their games, haven't allowed the team to cross midfield until like the end of the game. Ohio State, they can't say that, right? And Penn State's also forced a lot of turnovers when they need to. Ohio State can't say that. Although Penn State's actually forced less turnovers than you would expect because of how aggressive a defense like that is. But then they're getting more sacks because of that. So it kind of balances itself out in a way. Yeah, so Penn State has a chance. I just think it's going to be ruined. Penn State on paper has the better team, better defensive coordinator, but not better play caller, or at least so far. Not the better head coach. So coaching Ohio State, that's in Ohio State's favor. Personnel-wise, I'm actually going to give that to Penn State because Ohio State, they can't run the ball. And Penn State is first or second in college against the run. Ohio State's not going to be able to set the tempo early, which is going to be a detriment to them, and they're going to have to throw. And I know they have Harrison, and he went for 180 yards last year. But Diaz, I think, will learn his lesson, and so he won't go for 180 this year. He might go for 120. But, hey, without guys like Ibuka and Henderson, 120 to Harrison is going to be huge for us. Because even though that's a lot, that's less than last year. It's probably a good limit on him. It can keep them, if they only are throwing the ball at him and he's the only guy making big plays, 120 yards, I'll take that, okay? That's way better than last year whenever he was tearing us up. And 120 is tearing, but it's way better. Just trust me on that. Because you'd rather have a guy tear you up as long as nobody else is getting the football. So, personnel-wise, I think we look better defensively than they do defensively. And offensively, I think it's a toss-up. So, the fact that we are away this year with the worst coach, I'm confident Penn State can get it done, but then I'm also not confident. My prediction for this game, I think it's somewhere around Penn State 30, Ohio State 27. So, yeah, it's going to be a close game, but it shouldn't be. We all know if Penn State had a better coach, what the result of this game is going to be. So, Penn State, if you're watching this, fire James Franklin. This should be a blowout, but it won't be. Toodles.